Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also get more information, listen to previous shows at our website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And it's my pleasure to introduce Will Dennis, owner of UnScripted Productions, for being my guest today. Will, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, Blaine, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
And what you can do, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching. So,
Hey, everyone.
okay, this is Will Dennis. Will Dennis is a professional actor, teacher, certified mindset coach, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and owner operator of an improv studio, Unscripted Productions in Newtown, Pennsylvania. Whether delivering impactful workshops, speaking engagements, or one-on-one coaching, Will is a master guide for unlocking the highest human potential in individuals and teams. His work is an inspiring call to collectively flourish through play, self-discovery, and love. And I love that. If we can all do that, that sounds like
Yeah.
a lot of fun. But let me ask you this, Will. Where did you grow up as a kid?
So I grew up just outside Philadelphia. Huntington Valley,
Okay.
Pennsylvania, which is just outside the Northeast Philly.
Okay, I know it well. And when you were a kid growing up, did you always know you wanted to be, I guess, a bunch of different things, but you always wanted to know you wanted to be an improv guy?
No, definitely not. I don't think I even knew what improv was for
Right.
a considerable amount of time. And it wasn't until I got introduced to it. I was always involved in theater. So theater was my thing growing up, even as early as, sixth grade, probably. And then I did it throughout high school, throughout college. And really in high school and college when I got introduced to the idea of improv, merely as like a rehearsal type thing. It's not uncommon for theater groups or student theater groups to use improv to warm up, to rehearse, to do things like that. And that's how I was introduced to it. And then it just stuck with me. And as I started learning more about improv, I started learning more about the ideas behind it. And then that's when I started kind of falling in love with improv.
Well, take back to when you were said you first got introduced to theater, sixth grade. Do you remember the first thing you were ever in?
Yeah, of course. I was in The Wizard of Oz and I was the mayor of Munchkin City. And it won't show on Zoom, but if you meet me in real life, you'll understand why it's typecasting because I'm I am a generous 5'6" if I stand up straight, which is rare. So it's more of a 5'5". So yeah, that was my breakout role right there, Mayor of Munchkin City.
Well, I say, I'm 5'7", but I say a tall 5'7". Most people think I'm at least 5'7" and a quarter,
There you
so
go.
that's your, so a typecast, that's funny, your first role. And then you acted throughout high school and college after that?
Yeah, yeah. I was bit, I guess. I enjoyed and not so much being on stage, but it was one of those things that I started to understand as I was performing and involved in theater. I felt most fully alive. It's when I felt the most authentically myself and also just filled with a sense of joy and electricity. And I wanted that as much as I could get it. So yeah, that became my thing. I was a swimmer at a young age too. And when I got to high school, I swam for about a week and I went, nah, this isn't going to work out. And then from that point on, my sport, as it were, was theater.
Now, do you still do any acting?
Yeah, I mean less now. So I was acting for a long time, and then I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I think it's pretty safe to say probably the last time I did a show was about 5 years ago. Uh, so I'll get back to it once I'm through this phase of my life, but it's um it's the greatest role I've ever played so far as dad, and I want to make sure that I play it the best way I possibly can. So a couple things came off the plate for me, and performing was one of them, at least in shows. I still performed with our improv troupe, the Alexanders, for a little bit, and then scaled that back as well. But as far as performing in traditional theater, probably been about 5 years.
And you say the time commitment is amazing. You
Yeah.
have the acting, and where you have to prepare for it. So you acting, and then talk a little bit about how you moved into the improv work.
Yeah, so as it happens, I was doing a show. I was in a show at a a theater Act Two playhouse in Ambler, Pennsylvania, if anyone knows it. And it's run by a guy, he's a dear friend of mine, Tony Braithwaite, who's he's a gifted performer, gifted director, gifted producer. And he said to me, he runs the theater, and I was in the show. And he said, "How would you like to teach a class here? We're trying to start some classes." I was like, "Yeah, sure. What do you want me to teach?" And he's like, "Well, we could do an acting class or we could do an improv class." I was like, "All right, I will teach the improv class." I had enough of a background in it at that point, and sort of doing that, which as a working actor, you're trying to put together as many gigs as possible so that you can pay the bills, and that's what it started as. And then I started, as I was teaching it, I started falling in love with it in a deeper way than I knew was possible. So what started as just offering a class as a teaching artist or as an actor teaching class, it really changed everything. That first class really changed everything when I started to see folks respond to what we were doing and what we were creating.
And for the benefit of the folks who might be listening or watching this who don't know what improv is, I'll kind of put you on the spot here. And if you could describe it in like 2 hours or less,
Yeah, right.
what is improv?
Uh, so I think the best way to describe improv is coming together as a group of people and discovering things that hadn't yet been discovered. So a lot of times that ends up being funny. It doesn't always end up being funny, but that's really what it is. It's using a process, this process we call yes and using a process of yes and to discover some things, oftentimes in the context of games or in the context of scenes or things like that. So I try not to talk about improv as being quick or being witty or being spontaneous or working without a net or things like that, because that's ultimately not true. It's our best way of understanding it. When we see shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway, or Middleditch and Schwartz or folks like that, it's like, oh my gosh, they're making everything up as they go along, which that part is absolutely true, right? In improv, there's nothing prescribed, there is nothing pre-written. Everything sort of happens in real time. But what it really is a willingness of a group of people to discover something together and to be able to support one another in doing that so that you feel as safe, as confident, and as trusted as possible.
How do you deal with the
And the
objection?
results are often hilarious.
How do you deal with the objection that some people have, I guess, said they can't do improv or they feel uncomfortable with it, Do people tell you that?
Yeah, so all the time. And usually, so part of my work too is to go in with teams. We use improv for teams, whether it's businesses, corporations, educators, whatever. And almost every workshop that I do, I start off by giving people permission to hate improv, right? Uh, like I get it, and I tell them like it's the same thing for me. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and still to this day, if I'm at a show and they say now it's time for some audience participation, like the back sweat starts and I'm staring at the floor, not making eye contact with anyone. Like that is such a daunting thing. And it's why I don't describe improv that way for that very reason. And I describe it more as a process of collaboration because it makes sense to me. Nobody likes that. When you think of improv that way, you think about being thrust out of your comfort zone. It's not about stepping out, thrusting out. So we're very intentional the way that we teach and the way that we build workshops and things like that. We're very intentional about making sure that it is a slow, methodical, and deliberate process with very low risk, very high reward in the beginning until people get to a place of comfortability with it and they understand, oh my gosh, I can do this and it's rewarding and it's fun and it's safe. And I keep doing it and I'm still here. Like I have not died as a result of this. I'm not embarrassed as a result of this. I'm feeling more free and probably more present than I have in a long time.
I have
So,
to I have to give you a compliment for what you do in terms of you mentioned the Alexanders, and I
mhm,
recently had through you helped me through a party, and I was so impressed with two things. I don't think I told you this, Will, but I was so impressed with two things. One, that they asked for volunteers, and people kept coming out of the woodwork, and people I wouldn't have thought would have gotten up, but they got up. And the other part of that compliment is what I really like the fact that the folks running it gave the people permission to pass, or I forgot what they called it. What do they say when they you don't come up with something and you want to um, let the next person go.
Oh yeah, I guess pass. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just pass on something.
Yeah, but it's so cool, and I was surprised that not only did some of the amateurs who had never done before, but some of the pros did too. That sometimes you
Yeah.
just have to pass.
Well, yeah, I think one of the key components of improv is embracing the reality that there's no such thing as a mistake. Or the way we talk about it is that mistakes are opportunities. Um, and to not think that you have to have all the answers and have everything figured out and to know exactly what you're doing. Like it's just, I tell you, people hear improv and they think it's the most stress inducing
Right.
thing. And I think it's probably the most stress relieving thing when you do it well, in good hands. And I'm thrilled to hear that the team did that too. It's a real key component of what we do at Unscripted is making sure we take care of people and create spaces that are safe so that people can do things that surprise themselves, you know?
Because I was concerned, as you said, surprising me that people would get up. You know, I was worried. I had a nice
Yeah.
sized crowd, but what happens? Nobody gets up, but inevitably people get up.
Yeah. I don't think it's certainly always a concern of mine. I don't think I have done a show, a workshop, an event yet where nobody got up and we had to call it quits. And I think it is a result. If people feel like they're going to be okay and they're going to be taken care of, they'll get up. If people feel like they're going to be mocked or sort of made fun of, they're going to sit in their seat.
Let me put you on the spot a little bit, and
Yeah,
I'll kind of be your student. And just, I've heard the term before, I've seen it demonstrated, but show me, if you can, briefly the concept of you were saying yes and how
sure.
does that work?
Yeah, so the best here's the deal. So can we do a little exercise, just
Yeah,
the two of us?
if
It's
you don't
probably the
mind.
best way to sort of explain it, and then I can backfill with my, you know, pontificating and sort of defining. But let's do this. I'm just gonna put my phone here, so I want to have a timer, and we'll do a real short example of this. So what we're gonna do, Blaine, is the two of us is we're going to create something that never existed before. We're going to try to create something that never existed before. So this first round, let's let's create. We're going to create a new kitchen appliance. Okay, you're going to create a kitchen appliance that has never existed before, and we're just going to go back and forth with ideas. Okay, so for this first round, I'm going to ask you to offer the first idea for what the appliance should be. Okay. And then, so you might say something like, oh, it should be a coffee maker. Oh, it should be a whatever. Okay.
Okay.
Uh, Now the only catch is I'm going to give us 20 seconds to do this. The only catch is every single response needs to begin with the word no. Okay. Every response needs to begin with the word no. So if you said it was a coffee maker, I would have to say no and then offer something else. So in 20 seconds, let's see if we can create a brand new kitchen appliance that has never existed before using that one rule that every response after your first idea, Blaine, needs to begin with the word no. Okay.
I want to make a kitchen appliance that makes saltwater taffy.
No, 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 no. It should be a coffee maker that makes uh, macchiatos.
Okay. No, I don't think so.
All right, give me something else then.
Another kitchen appliance?
Sure.
Okay. I want to make a kitchen appliance that makes popcorn in the sink.
No, no. It should be a kitchen appliance that washes your dishes before you even use them. Uh, cool. So that's I gave us more time. We did
Right.
35 seconds.
I
All
get
right,
the
so
idea.
that's the concept. And now let's create something else. Do the same thing, 20 seconds. We're going to create a roller coaster. Okay. A roller coaster that has never existed before, brand new roller coaster. This time, every response is going to begin with the phrase yes and. Okay. Every time you respond is going to begin with yes and. So that'll be yes and something else. So for instance, it should be 10,000 feet tall. Yes. And it should be blue, whatever. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Got
All
it.
right.
Yeah.
Let's do this in 20 seconds. You can start us off again, Blaine. Go ahead.
Okay. A ride we're coming up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I want to create a ride wheel that people have never seen before.
Yes. And they won't even see it when they're on it because it's invisible.
Yes, and you think that could be done?
Yes. And not only can it be done, we're going to do it twice. We're going to do it on the East Coast and the West Coast.
Yes, and what about could we do it in other countries as well?
Yes. And the moon.
And the moon and
Yeah.
and Jupiter anywhere?
See, cool. So like that's the best way that we use an example is and a lot of times we'll do like 4 or 5 rounds with different things, but to understand that when we reject offers or when we say no to them, we don't end up with anything. So we tried to create a kitchen appliance and all we did was negate the other person's offer and then have to come up with a brand new idea on our own, right? It was like, no, it shouldn't be that, it should be this. Whereas when we use yes and you just start with a roller coaster, you start with whatever and then you just offer onto it. So we ended up with a bi-coastal invisible roller coaster that is also intergalactic, right? So that's the power of yes and is you end up with an intergalactic bi-coastal invisible roller coaster versus the process of no, where we don't have anything. We have like whatever we ended up with one first idea. So that's the way we demonstrate yes and to folks. And then we talk about it as it's it's really about radical acceptance and contribution.
And
So
what was interesting with that exercise is just feeling it. The second part was fun. I was laughing and
yes.
smiling. The first part wasn't fun. You were rejecting. But just taking that point a step further, it's interesting you mentioning the 3 and 5 year old you have. And isn't this kind of a crucial thing to do with kids? As opposed to rejecting their ideas, just whether they say yes and
Yeah, I do. I mean, not for nothing, improv's the best parenting training I've ever had in my entire life. And it does so much as far as parenting goes because it allows my children to be accepted, to feel seen, to validate their ideas, and then to build upon their ideas. And we do different things. So this is just a little example. My daughter and I, my 5 year old, and one day she wanted to make a cake, and I was like, "Oh, we don't have ingredients for cake. Like we can't just make a cake." So we go to the store and get them. I was like, "I can't. Like your sister's sleeping. Like we can't. I'm not gonna leave. Like we can't go. Sorry." And she's like, "Well, let's just make a cake with the ingredients we do have." And I realized in the moment I just said no to her like 4 or 5 times, and I was like, "All right, hypocrite." Yeah, like you spend your life espousing different ideas. So I was like, "Okay, let's do it." And we called it an improv cake, and we used what we had. She got to pick the ingredients. I didn't say no to a single ingredient, and she got to crack the egg, which was a total mess, but it was such an opportunity for learning. And then we even made pink icing. We figured out how to do it. Uh, and I'm not going to tell you, it wasn't half bad. Like it was edible. I had a piece of the cake and I was like, all right, this is something. It looked like a cake. It had the shape of a cake. It had the texture of a cake. It was a little dry. But yeah, we were able to do that. And it's like, I think about it all the time with kids. And, we all remember from being in school too, like what it does to our sense of confidence and creativity if we get shut down, or if we get ridiculed for an idea that we might have, that can really stymie us for a long time. But we also remember what it felt like to find somebody who believed in us and our ideas and how that just absolutely propelled us, right? Somebody that was willing to accept us and then participate with us. And that's why we talk about, again, it's why we talk about yes and as radical acceptance and contribution is like, for me, this is the secret to humanity right here is just being willing to accept one another and then participate in one another's stories.
And the key is on that, I imagine too, to remember yes and the word you never say is but, right? That
Yeah.
that that negates everything you said. It makes like a negative,
Yeah. So with the exercise we just did, usually round two is yes, but, and then we get to yes and, but we sped it up. Um, Yeah, we call it a Trojan horse, but or yes, but because it looks like a yes.
right?
It's a no that is hiding inside of a yes. And there's that old adage, right? When a sentence has a but in it, you don't remember anything that came before the but.
Now, do you find the kids are using this now also? Do they know it or to 10?
Yeah, to a certain extent, we're getting there. So we've, again, my 5 year old more so, and needs to be reminded. But we've created games too. So we'll use building blocks or Legos or like magnetic pools or tiles, and we'll say, all right, let's play yes and we just take turns and we just place one, and then the other person has to accept where it's been placed and then place theirs on top of it, and then we make whatever we make, and then we've got something that never existed before. So yeah, some days, other days, they're both filled with no and they're screaming at one another and they forget how to share, and all of that stuff. But I think the more I model it, my hope is that by the process of osmosis, as they get to be older, they recognize the value of acceptance.
Would be so cool at a future workshop. You should do this. You should bring in that cake, as an example. Tell your daughter we're gonna make it again, and then can you imagine you bring I have a special treat for you, and it's what do you call a cake? A yes
Yes,
and
and Kate. Yeah,
yeah, but what a great, that would really drive the point
yeah,
home. What's fascinating speaking to you, Will, is the fact that I'm beginning to see now, so we're talking about 3 and 5 year old, talk about how this applies to adults. So you were telling me off the air, you do these workshops. I mean, we should mention two things they can contact you for. They contact you as I did once for a party, and you'll do a party show. But you
for
also
sure.
you do serious stuff with companies and organizations. What do
Yeah,
you
so
do for them?
we do corporate training as far as team dynamics and communication, and we use improv, what we call applied improvisation. So when we talk about applied improvisation, it's we take the tenets, the principles of improv, and use them in a non-theatrical setting, whatever that is. So we've worked with folks like Vanguard and Johnson and Johnson, and accountants, and we've also worked with schools, with students. We've worked with teachers. So it's any team. If you exist on a team as far as your livelihood, your career goes, we can work with you, and that's what we do. It's funny because it's not very different than what I do with my young kids. It's not very different than what I do in a community class setting. It's giving folks permission to play, but reteaching them the value of acceptance and contribution and what that looks like on a team. Now, improv happens to be, for my purposes, the best example of what it means to exist on a team. Right, you're creating something and discovering something that hasn't really existed yet, and the only way to be successful in improv is to adhere to these core principles of ensemble. Uh,
Give an
so
example,
it's
if you can. You're talking
sure,
about working with corporations, and when you said it, it kind of caught me off guard. Accountants. So what
yeah.
did you do? What did you do with accountants?
So the group we worked with, uh, we went. They were a repeat client, so we saw them. I think a total of 3 times, which is awesome. Uh, and the first time we went and worked with them, it was just team dynamic. So we introduced them to the concept of yes and we introduced them to our other principles. So our other principles, it's really about make your team look good first, make offers and accept gifts. Mistakes are fumbles and fumbles are opportunities. And then bring a brick, we'll build the cathedral together. And when we unpack those 5 things, we put people in any position, in any industry, in a position to be more effective. So ultimately, what we're doing is we're teaching folks how to collaborate and listen in such a way that it empowers both them and their teammates. So yeah, what we do, like anything we do, I know accountants is the most interesting. We also work with dentists. That's the one people always like, really? Um, but in everything we do, we just again we are intentional about creating a safe space along the way so that you can have high reward from little risk, and then we unpack it so you experience through play, and then you unpack the value that is there. Right, brain's favorite way to learn is through playing. That's just the way it goes. um, so to be able to do that and then talk to them about, oh, hey, what was really happening here, and then how you can transfer this into your work is this. So accountants, which I don't want to judge any accountants, it's not a I have or that I've developed or probably ever will develop, but a lot of their world is it's numbers, it's black and white and
Right.
things like that. So the first time we worked with them, we actually came in, it was tax season, and it was before sort of you got into the craze of tax season. They wanted to do something that was decompressing. for their team. So they brought us in. But then once we introduced them to these things, they're like, oh, we want to bring you back on different occasions to work with specific teams within the company.
Let me ask you another group that I think would be fascinating for you to work with. Have you ever worked with politicians?
No, so yes, we did a
Yes,
fundraiser.
and
Yeah,
yes, and yeah,
we did a fundraiser. So that was more of an event, more similar to your birthday event. And then it's funny you mentioned this. I just did a workshop at like a local community. It's an arts community, and it was like an introduction to improv. And a guy came up to me afterwards and he said, I'm really interested in, he calls them kitchen table conversations, but like bringing people together from different
yeah.
political views. And he's like, I would love to incorporate you if you could come in and do this in such a way that it sort of dismantles and sort of de-escalates the the angst that we bring into those conversations or the vitriol sometimes that we bring in and just levels the playing field in such a way that it creates a platform that we can have open, honest, and conversations. Curious conversations. Yeah, if you get me started on politics, I'll go for a while because I think curiosity is the answer to most of our problems right now. We just forgot how to be curious.
So I'm listening to him saying, wow, would that be fantastic? Not just work with one party, but work with the two parties and get them
Across the
talking.
aisle.
And
Yep.
but can you imagine talking and having fun, at the
Yeah.
same time? But
Yeah.
what
Having fun together.
a great idea. The when somebody contacts you, I guess for the first time, um, like for an organization. So what do you tell you can help the organization with? How do you help organizations?
Yeah, so usually the biggest things that we help them with are collaboration, multi-generational communication. Right? That's a real thing right now. There are like upwards of 4 or 5 generations in the same workspace. Um, Also, the return to work and the hybrid models are where companies are struggling. Like they want to make the most of the time when they are together, and they recognize that there needs to be some sort of um, shared experience in order to bring a team closer together, but we don't always have that when it's remote or hybrid. So a lot of the work we've been doing now is teams that aren't necessarily together ever, except for when we come in. And then we do a lot of leadership training too. So we've been working with 2 different companies on, they have their emerging leaders academies within their company. So they've identified a cohort of folks that they want to put through their leadership program, and then we'll come in and we'll kick the program off, introduce some of these ideas, and then they've got some other folks that they work with from a corporate training standpoint. We'll come in about halfway through a 2-year program, revisit the ideas, and then we'll come back at the end as a culminating workshop for those leadership programs too.
Almost what we're doing this kind of virtually. When COVID hit, did you do any of this virtually?
Yeah. We did. We offered classes virtually. Uh, we did a couple corporate things virtually. And yeah, listen, it worked for COVID. I'll be the first one to tell you if I'm doing improv, I want to be in the same room as you.
Sure.
And the Zoom lag is not improv friendly, so that became a challenge. But I had there was there was a gig we did that was virtual, and then COVID lifted, and we went out and we did an in person with the same company. And I sort of said the same thing. I was like, "Oh, man, yeah, that virtual, blah blah blah." And one of the team members there was like, "Look, we had a great time. We didn't know the difference." So they're like, "Don't undersell what you were able to do virtually." And I was like, "No, I appreciate that. Thank you." For me, it was always like I felt so bad. I wanted to be in the same room, so it was so difficult. But especially during a time like COVID, to have something like that, a lot of companies were really appreciative because it was it was better than sitting on a Zoom just stagnant for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, same thing too. I taught a couple of Zoom courses, and I made them interactive. People said you couldn't do it, but if you think it out, you can. You just have
Yeah.
to a different delivery. But yeah, your point is well taken. I'd much rather be in person than on Zoom. But as an alternative, even this podcast. I'm not in Bucks County now, so to
Yeah.
speak with you, I'm not coming to Bucks County.
No, yeah, and I'm not driving down to North Carolina, but so like there's so many things that we can now do. This is a perfect example. And even improv, right? It the same as being in the room? No. Is it worse? It's not. It's different. It's a different experience. And as long as you understand that it's a different experience, there's so many things you can still do through a virtual platform.
Where do you see your company going 5 years from now?
Well, we're really excited because here in PA, and I hope this answers your question. Here in PA, we have what's called Act 48, which is essentially all teachers in Pennsylvania, K through 12, need to accumulate 180 hours of professional development over the
Right.
course of 5 years. So every 5 years, you need 180 hours. And we just last week got a letter from Harrisburg that we're now an approved Act 48 provider,
Very
which
nice.
means we can go into schools, run our improv workshops, and the teachers can get continuing education credit for it. We can also host things at our studio that teachers could come and get credit for as well. But that was big for us because that's a space that I want to be in. Is here's the long and the short of it is that I started this company because I believe that improv can change the world, and that's a big undertaking and a big dream. But when I look at it, I think it starts with young people. Even we were talking about my own two children. I'm also a classroom teacher, so I teach by day. So I have an affinity for teachers and for education. But if we're going to help educate the leaders of tomorrow to be people of acceptance and contribution, then I think it starts with teaching the teachers or equipping the teachers, right? They don't need to be taught. They're probably some of the smartest people in this country, but giving them some skills to be able to bring improv into their classrooms, to create those spaces for their students so that every student is experiencing what it feels like to be accepted and supported, and then have the ability. Man, think of it, the difference for a young person if you're able to reframe mistakes as opportunities and like actually reframe them, not just tell people to learn from their mistakes, but like to actually understand that some of the mistakes I make are the very moments that I'm growing the most, and they're turning into these fruitful opportunities. So, as far as where we see Unscripted going in the next 5 years, uh, hopefully we're in the education space, from a professional development standpoint, and hopefully we continue to grow as far as the corporate programs. And my hope is that we grow as community classes too. Like that's the heart of what we do. Are people off the street who want to take an improv class, and they come in and they just realize the power of it. So, those are the three areas that I want to see us grow the most, so that we can accomplish this mission of changing the world through improv.
The exciting thing about what you're saying is it's making me think, boy, do I wish I had brought you in. I was involved a little bit with in-service education at Bucks County Community College. And boy, would I have loved to have had you come in. And can you imagine people smile and laugh and have a good time at an in-service meeting? Have
Yeah,
it
that
in the public schools, have you done in-service meetings at all?
Yeah, so we're not in the public schools yet. So we're starting with independent schools. Again, this is like a week old.
Okay, great.
So we've done a couple where we just couldn't offer Act 48 credit. Like schools still brought us in to do workshops, but we weren't able to offer Act 48 credits. So the kicker with the public schools, their PD throughout the course of the year
Right.
really covers their credit. So teachers don't have to worry about going out and finding them. The independent schools need to be really intentional about how they program their PD to make opportunities for teachers to earn those continuing ed credits. So we're going to start with the independent schools, and then uh, second semester I'm going to start reaching out to the public school districts to understand what their district goals are, and then help them understand how improv can play a part in that, in achieving that. So yeah, my hope is both,
Well,
but we'll see.
if anybody wants to get in touch with you, find out either more about your company or get in touch with you individually, what's the best bet?
Yeah, so I mean, easiest way to learn a little bit more about us is to go to our website. It's www.unscriptedproductions.com. Again, that's www.unscriptedproductions.com. And then anyone who's listening to this, you can email me directly. It's just will@unscriptedproductions.com. So my first name, WILL at unscriptedproductions.com. And that goes right to me. We have a general email as well, but if you're listening and watching this, you can feel free to email me directly.
Okay, I'll just add, as I mentioned earlier, that not only have Will to train you, but if you're looking for somebody have a different party, hire Unscripted Productions. You'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Well, Dennis, I'd like to thank you for being my guest on this version of the Blaine's World webcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti. And hopefully next time I'm in Bucks County or you're in North Carolina, we'll actually meet in person. Thanks, man.
Yeah, that would be awesome, Blaine. Thank you so much for having me.
Great.